Oh boy, I got the Halo assault rifle out. That means it's time to piss off some Sony ponies. So yeah, let's dive in. A little while back, I made a video talking about how I sold my PS5 and my Xbox Series X, and you can check the video out over there for the full context, but the TLDR is that I blamed the exclusives problem as the biggest reason why I sold my Xbox and my PlayStation, but kept the Nintendo Switch. I mean, think about it. If I want to play a Nintendo Switch game legally, I have to own a Nintendo Switch. But if I want to play a PlayStation game, like Spider-Man or Spider-Man 2 or God of War, or I want to play an Xbox game like Forza or Halo, I can play them, usually at a higher frame rate, generally with better options for settings, and in a more comfortable way, in my opinion, on the PC. And so there was really no reason for me to keep either of those consoles. But something I didn't mention in that video, because I was still sort of forming my opinion on it, was the fact that I am boycotting Sony's publishing team for games. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Now, to be clear, I'm only boycotting Sony's publishing team for games and any game developers under that banner. I'm not boycotting Sony cameras because I don't have to sign into a PSN account to use my Sony camera. Yet. And besides, the camera I use is from 2015, so, good luck getting me to sign into a PlayStation or a Sony account to use my A7S II. Regardless, I'm boycotting the publishing team for several reasons, and one of the first reasons is one that I just alluded to, which is the sign-in debacle. Now, it wasn't too big of a deal for some games, and I have the same issues with Xbox, but not quite to the same degree. Let me explain. When I download a game like Halo Infinite, I expect there to be a sign-in of some kind because it's cross-platform. I can play it on Xbox or I can play it on PC. And I would expect the same thing for a multiplayer game on Sony's side of things. And that's really just sort of a common thing in modern gaming. There's a lot of cloud sync options that lets you play a game on PC and then pick it up on a console if it's the same game under the same account. But Sony specifically did something that just infuriated almost everyone. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we're going back to talking about Helldivers. So for anybody who doesn't know, which I'd be surprised if you didn't, but I'll explain it anyway, Helldivers 2 is a game that was insanely popular. In fact, it's still pretty popular. It's a third-person PvE game where you complete objectives while fighting off waves of enemies. It was developed by Arrowhead Studios, and it's a blast. It sucks that I'm not playing it anymore, but it's a really fun game, and it was out for 3 months before Sony decided to try and ruin everything. What had happened was Helldivers 2 was being sold worldwide, and it exploded. It became an extremely popular game to the point where, in the early days of that game, it took forever to actually be able to connect to a server because there weren't enough of them. And according to Sony, this was the reason why they didn't require a PSN sign-in at the start. Which seems believable enough, and 3 months in, they're like, hey, we're going to require you to sign into a PSN account now. But that's only half of the story, and basically what Sony hoped people would accept as the whole story. But for anybody who does even the slightest bit of research, this is the whole story. Here is every country that supports the PlayStation Network. But those countries that don't have access to the PlayStation Network could buy Helldivers 2. So if you suddenly require a PSN sign-in, well, now you can't play your game, even though you were able to buy the game and play it for 3 months before Sony turned a switch and took away your access. Starting to see the problem I have? So, obviously, this was a very, very public example of people just telling Sony no. There was a massive dip that I was hoping would get turned into a cape in Helldivers, but I mean, maybe it has, I'll never know because I'm not playing it anymore. But the dip in reviews was the world telling Sony to go f*** themselves. And it was beautiful because it made it clear that if you're going to require a sign-in, do it the right way, do it up front, and give people a reason to use it. Like, if I was playing Helldivers 2 on my PS5, and then I wanted to play it on my PC, and I wanted my saves to go back and forth, I would have no issue with signing into a PSN account. But I bought it on PC, and so did millions of people, to actually be able to play this game without having to be bogged down by Sony's bullshit, and then 3 months later, Sony required it. So that's one of my biggest problems. Another issue I have with Sony publishing doesn't revolve so much around the PSN login, but it does still revolve around Helldivers 2, which is that while Sony and Arrowhead were going through it with this whole controversy, Sony decided to delist the game from every country that did not have access to a PSN account. Now, this is like closing the barn door after the horse got out, because tons of people all over the world had already bought this game, and as gamers do, if they find a really awesome game, they're going to recommend it to friends. So if somebody bought this game in a country where you can't get a PSN account, but they got the game, it's really fun, it's a multiplayer game for God's sakes, and they say, hey man, I want to recommend this game to you because I'd love to play with you at some point in this game. Well, now Sony's delisted the game, so this person has the game, but their friend can't buy the game because Sony delisted it. Not only does that hurt the gaming experience for people who wanted to play this game with friends within their own country that now can't get the game, but it also reduces the prospective sales that you could get for the game company who is publishing through you. Sony Publishing was actively hurting the potential sales of a game studio under their publishing banner, not for any legitimate reason, but solely because they wanted to boost the numbers of the PlayStation Network logins. That is it. That is literally it. And they're doing the same thing with single-player games. So yeah, let's get into that real quick. When it comes to a game like Helldivers 2, I've said in the past that if I was playing on a PS5 and a PC and I wanted my saves to move back and forth, I'd have no issues signing into a PSN account. And to some degree, if a PSN login was required on day one, that would have been significantly more tolerable, even though I don't want to sign into one, because games require that all the time when it's multiplayer. They require it for cross-platform saves, cross-platform play, just in general access to multiplayer servers. But Helldivers 2 didn't require that at all and still functioned just fine for 3 months. But let's play devil's advocate. You need the sign-in so that you can access the multiplayer servers, even though that's not a thing. Okay, fine. You need it for multiplayer access. Care to explain to me why a game like God of War Ragnarok requires a PSN login? It's not a multiplayer game, so why do I need to sign into a PSN account? Why do I need to sign into a PSN account to play Spider-Man? That is also an exclusively single-player game. Well, you're forcing it because you want more PlayStation Network sign-ins. Why? Because you want to be able to tell your shareholders that the PlayStation Network is doing just fine and that you are beating the Xbox, because you still live in 2010 where the console wars are a thing. Or hell, even 2012 when the console wars were a thing. And by the way, you won because Xbox shit the bed so bad that they are still recovering from it. Get over yourself, Sony. You already are winning the console wars that are already pointless. And at this point, you're still losing to PC because you have even admitted that the PC is a worthwhile gaming platform because you're porting your games to it. It just, what pisses me off is that when I look at a publisher, I think a company that a game studio goes to get their games out to as many people as possible. And yeah, the publishers may impose certain requirements. I mean, look at Microsoft and Bungie. Back in the early 2000s, with the launch of the original Xbox, Microsoft bought Bungie, and Bungie made Halo. What were the requirements? Well, it had to run on the Xbox, and it had to be available day one as a launch title. Aside from that, what did we get? We got Halo, an incredible game that reached millions of players, and up until a couple years ago, was basically the gold standard for a first-person shooter on a console. What do we get with Helldivers 2? We get an incredible game, and then 3 months later, Sony takes away basically full access to the game for 2/3 of the world? Yeah, fuck you, Sony. And what makes this worse is that this isn't the first time that Sony has displayed this kind of behavior. I did a video a while back talking about how Sony lost the distributing rights for, I think it was Discovery, and instead of offering their users some sort of credit or hell, even just refunding it or letting them download the content before it was removed from the servers, Sony just said, hey, this is getting taken out of your library. Thanks for the money. Fuck you. And I've talked with a friend of mine who's very pro-digital purchase, and courtesy of talking with him, I understand that some people have the perspective of a purchase is just buying the access to a license, basically. I get that, but there's a difference between buying access to a license and doing something wrong or going outside of what the license agreement says and losing access. Like that, in that case, is your fault. You broke the rules or you did something that broke the license and you don't have access to it anymore. There's a difference between that and basically being told, hey, you've done nothing wrong and you are literally following the rules of the license that you paid for and we're taking it away anyway because fuck off. Is it in the agreement? No. Fuck you anyway. Like, that's the problem I have with it. And so for Sony to basically just want to boost their PSN numbers and put 3 months worth of gameplay and 3 months worth of sales down the drain, it's so stupid because they are hurting the gaming industry. They are hurting developers who are relying on them as a publisher. And at the end of the day, they're just hurting their reputation, and more people like me are going to come around and boycott Sony. I mean, hell, I know Pirate Software is doing the exact same thing, basically for the exact same reason.
Man, and I just can't support it. So if you look up here on Steam, I went to PlayStation Publishing LLC, and you can see right here, I have this set as ignored.
So it's not something that's going to end well for Sony. But on the other hand, there are enough Sony fanboys that breathe exclusively through their mouth and buy anything with the PlayStation logo on it that I'm sure they'll stay afloat for a little while longer. I'm starting to rant at this point because I just have a little bit of a sore spot for Sony ponies. They just piss me off and can't wait to see them in the comments. Either way, that's been it. Hopefully this video was maybe a sign for some of the Sony ponies out there to close their mouths, breathe through their nose, think with more than 2 brain cells. I just wanted to make this video to express my opinions on why I feel like the actions of Sony's publishing team are actually damaging in the long run to not just the gaming industry, but the game studios that rely on them to actually get their games out to the public. It's not all about the numbers on the PSN. It shouldn't be all about the numbers on the PSN, but that's just my opinion. I'm not a shareholder at Sony. It's whatever. But regardless, hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, definitely go ahead and subscribe. And of course, I look forward to seeing your comments down below, whether it be Sony Pony comments or actual calm, rational discourse. Whatever it ends up being, I'm here for it. So I hope to see you all in the next video. Until then, thank you all so much for watching, and have a good one.